Lazy D here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install a remote oil filter kit on this 2024 Can-Am Defender Max Limited. Any limited model this should apply to of Defenders. The reason I'm updating the oil filter on this is the limited models that have AC, the oil filter is in a terrible spot to access. And when you do get access to it, unless you really clean your machine really good, there's a pretty good chance you're gonna get some dirt into the oil filter housing on the side of the engine when you do that job. So to make your maintenance better and way easier, I would recommend getting one of these kits. I'm gonna show you what I got. Here's the kit I got. This comes from MCE Offroad products, but it was actually purchased through Mark CAD Engineering website, which is the only place I could find this for sale. So I'm sure they're related businesses. So it comes with instructions, your actual remote oil filter, and the block that makes that possible. Some nice AN fittings on both sides, hoses. This is the adapter piece that's going to go in where your old existing oil filter is going to come out of. The filter they use in this kit is a Baldwin 1406. We got some hose clamps to keep these secured together, the mounting bolts for that remote oil filter, a template so we know where to drill the holes, and then some zip ties and a sticker came with the kit. Another thing, I have a new oil filter here. We're gonna use this gasket on this new piece that's gonna go in where your oil filter is in the bottom here. If you're gonna be doing this, it's obviously a lot easier to do this while you're already changing the oil because you're gonna have to access that portion. So I just bought a kit that already had this filter, even though I'm not gonna use the old style filter, but I'd like to put a new gasket instead of reusing the old one. Got my machine up in the air. If you got a lift, great. If not, you'll have to get on the ground. First thing I'm going to do, drain the oil. 17 millimeter headed engine oil drain plug. So I'm just going to drain this out until it goes from streaming a little bit to dripping, and then I'm going to close this back up. I warmed up my engine. I find it's always best to warm up your engine before you drain it. Any things that have settled in your oil are going to be suspended in the oil and will flush out better. I cleaned off my drain plug and I put a new sealing washer on there. Make sure if you don't see your sealing washer on your plug, you get it off the bottom of the engine case. It's hard to see in there, there's oil dripping. I don't want to get it on my camera. So make sure that's clean. I'm gonna go ahead and put my drain plug back in. And now I'm gonna torque this. I'll put the torque spec here for you. When you first lift your bed up, if this strut is attached, you're not going to be able to lift it very high and you're not going to have much room to work in here. So what you can do is pull this pin out and then push this pin out and hold your bed while you do this, because it'll probably fly up and fall if you don't. And then you can set your bed up a bit further to have some more room to work in here. I'm going to go ahead and enter this thing at the passenger rear door. Our oil filter is down below this cover. There's another plastic cover below it. So I'm going to take this seat out. If you haven't done this, should be able to pull the top towards the front and then up. Should come right out. I'm going to put that as far away as possible, leave myself room to work down here. And then this center one, if you push this clip back, this will come down. And then there's some clips we can take out here to get that removed. With those seat backs removed, I'm going to go ahead and pop these two push pin clips out. With those push pins out, I should be able to get this paneling out. I just pull up, it gets a little stuck in this bottom corner, but it's possible. So I'm gonna kind of lift this and turn it and wiggle it until this comes out here. There we go. I'll set that up in the front seat. Now there's 11 screws. These are all T30s. Around the perimeter of this, there, and then there's 4 along the bottom. What I'm using is an electric ratchet with about 18 inches of extensions, a universal socket at T30. Some of these you could get with an L key or other tools, but you're gonna need to spend some time to get these out. This is the biggest pain in this job, so that's why we're putting the kit in. With those screws out, I'm gonna be able to lift this up and out of here now. And now we can see way down here is where our oil filter's at. So if yours is pretty dusty like mine, like this is a pretty new machine but not brand new, I would recommend before doing any of this, you blow all this out with like compressed air to get any dirt and dust away from here so it doesn't end up in your new oil filter kit. The heads for these screws are either a T30, a Torx 30, or an 8mm. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this unscrewed and put the new filter kit in here. So I don't know if you can see, but oil spilled everywhere and it's a mess. I try really not to make messes when I work, and I'm sure you do too. That's why this existing oil filter setup is so frustrating. I'm gonna get a rag down here and try to clean up what I can. And getting this oily oil filter out above your nice seat in here is just poor at best. Before we put this new adapter piece in where our old oil filter went, I'm going to take this filter gasket off a new filter I have. If you don't have a new filter when you're doing this, just take it out of your old oil filter. I'm going to put it in the bottom of this remote oil filter adapter. Make sure it's pushed in real good, and then I'll lube this before I put it down in the block. Along with this O-ring I will as well, with engine oil. I'm going to go ahead and get a little oil from this filter housing. You could use new oil. Used oil is fine for me. This is just to lube up these O-rings so they don't get damaged when you install them. And now I'm going to install this so the 90-degree fitting is pointed up. To get that cap back on, this 8mm or 5/16 ratchet wrench was really helpful. It's pretty tight down there. Now that I got that attached, we're gonna move on to our next step. Here's our new remote oil filter adapter installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the lines on the oil filter housing adapter. These are color coded. They're, for mine at least, they're red and yellow. The 90-degree ended line is yellow and the straight line is red. So I'm just going to attach them on one side. I'm going to run these in down by my oil filter adapter. Before you run your lines, maybe a good idea to throw some masking tape on like I did to keep any crud out of the lines. I'm going to put this in, our filter adapters down there. So I've got my two oil hoses connected at the other end down there. These lines, so I imagine this is going to sit somewhere in here on the frame. These lines go under these few wire looms right here at the fuel tank, up under the air box here, and then down through there to come to the top of that oil filter adapter piece. So I have the passenger side line on. Before I proceed with threading on the driver's side line, I'm going to snug this up and tighten it. I'm not going to be able to get a wrench on this line once the other line is on. These are an 11/16. And now tighten up the driver's side line that I have it on. My next step here, we're looking from the driver's side now, so I'm going to put our drill template here and find out where I want this. Seems like somewhere here is good. I'm going to go look on the other side and make sure when I drill these holes I'm not going to hit anything I don't want to. Yep, other side looks clear. So I'm going to drill these holes. When I drill these holes here, I'm going to go through both sides of the frame. So we're going to through bolt basically, or we're going to go through the frame and attach into the oil filter housing. So I'm going to hold this in place, drill these holes. My holes are drilled. Before I bolt everything down, I'm gonna paint the inside of these holes where the raw metal's exposed on both sides so no rust develops here, or helps at least prevent for a while rust developing. Before you do that, make sure that you can bolt everything up. The template piece is for 1/4-inch holes, which is what I drilled, and they're 1/4-inch bolts, so it's a tight fit. If you drill these not exactly where they're supposed to be, you might have a really hard time getting the bolts into these 2 holes. If you do that, I would recommend just upsizing these bolt holes a few sizes. It's no big deal, and then paint them when you're done. Just make sure it fits before you paint it. Now that I have this housing all mounted up, I'm going to tighten up my lines on this side. I'm going to hold the lines how I want them when I tighten it so they kind of stay in that place. Now that I have everything mounted up, I'm going to go ahead and take the oil filter off, and I'm going to fill this up before I fill the engine with oil and do our first startup. Normally I don't fill oil filters, but in this case with this add-on system, the extra volume that the oil pump's going to have to fill before it gets to your engine, I think this is worthwhile to do, at least for the first time you do this. Don't forget to lube up your O-ring as well. Then I'll tighten this down about as tight as I can get it by hand. I'm going to fill up my oil, which is here. I'm getting ready to start. I've put in my 2.2 quarts of oil. When I start this, I'm not going to walk away. I'm going to start this and I'm going to come back here. I want to make sure I visually inspect everything that's new in here. None of this stuff has been pressurized. Sometimes stuff happens. So like the manufacturer put this hose in this fitting and then put this fitting in the aluminum housing. I made connections at these AN fittings and I re-put the oil filter on. Back here, I've got my new oil filter adapter in these fittings as well. So I'm definitely going to check all this stuff. And this stuff I wiped off pretty good. And you can see I still have a rag below it. So if there is any leak, it's going to be apparent. I kind of made a mess when I was taking it apart. And if you leave a mess, it's really hard to tell when you have a new leak. So make sure you clean everything up before you start it and then just check over real good for oil leaks. I've run my engine for a little bit and I've verified there's no leaks. I ended up adding a 1/2 quart to this. So my total engine oil that I added was about 3 quarts. You may need an extra one if you got a factory service kit. I just want to point out that the correct procedure for checking your oil in these Can-Ams is to put the dipstick in, thread it all the way down, and then pull it all the way back out, and that will be your level check. So you want your level to end up in between the minimum and maximum lines here. Here's a final of my hose routing. I've put the securing clamps in. Kind of goes down around. It's zip tied up to some of the harness up there. Comes down. Has some more zip ties on the heater hose here. Not very tight. I don't want to pinch anything off. And then down to our adapter housing. So I'm going to go ahead. The last thing I'm going to do is pull this rag out. I got way down here. Now I'm going to button up this plastic panel first. Then our little insulating cover there, and then our 2 seat backs, and this is going to be assembled. So my install in this kit is completed, and I'm thinking right now about how thankful I am that I'm not going to have to do the oil filter in the factory location again on this machine. If you've done it, you know how tight quarters it is, and in general a pain. I'm pretty handy with tools, and it takes me probably an extra half hour to do that oil filter, which is to me ridiculous. The maintenance on these machines should be as easy as possible so these stay on the road as long as possible. But anyway, hopefully this is helpful, and if you like this kit or like the video, please like, comment, or subscribe. Check you later.